Hey guys, it's Adam from Lucipixel and welcome back. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, I was in elementary school, and I remember distinctly, very clearly, working on an art project for my art class, which was at the time taught by my French teacher. And I remember exactly what this art project was. I had made a sculpture of this kind of like humanoid type of two-legged body using blue Play-Doh or blue clay or something like that, blue Play-Doh. And I created a face using a paper plate. And I remember painting the paper plate yellow and then creating these big cartoon eyes using red and black paint. And I glued that to this much smaller body. So imagine this little blue body with no hands or feet, just the arms and legs, connected to this huge paper plate head. And I was very proud of this. And my teacher looked at my sculpture and she said, you shouldn't paint the face like that, she says to my 5-6-year-old self. And she grabs some paint and she repaints it for me. And I started to cry because this was mine. This was my art. But being a young child and not having ever attended any formal art school, didn't realize that that's kind of a blasphemous thing to do in an art context. Art is a form of personal expression. A form of self-expression. It's your voice. It's your vision. It's your priorities. And she basically ruined my drawing. She said, this is how it should be done properly. And she changed the face. I can't even remember what she did to it, but I remember her altering it and it really upset me. I came home later on that day and told the story to my mother, who immediately got really upset and shared with me the cardinal rule to art school and art teaching, which is you never touch your students' work unless you're offering some kind of academic critique, you're offering some kind of advice, you're learning how to draw something and you need help, you need a demonstration on how to do that. In that case, it's perfectly fine. But otherwise, if somebody's creating an original piece of work, you keep your bloody hands off of it. And she ended up going to the school and bringing this up. My mother, having been an art teacher for many years herself, and basically said very clearly that as an art teacher, she's never allowed to touch a student's work. Now, of course, you can't entirely blame my teacher because she wasn't an art teacher or an artist by trade. She was just a French teacher who was given the task of teaching an art class, which is very common in the public school system. That's a pet peeve of mine, but I digress. I've even found myself in that same situation, being put in a position to teach classes that I wasn't completely qualified for, and it wasn't only frustrating, but it was incredibly humiliating. But yeah, so my mother went in, made a complaint, spoke about them, and they said, we perfectly understand, you're absolutely right. And they gave me the opportunity to repaint it in the likeness that I wanted it to look like. And all of those works were submitted to the school board building, which wasn't too far off, to be displayed at the school board, all of our little art projects and stuff like that. And I was very proud of that piece. So about a week later or so, me and my family get together and we go over to the school board building and we go in and we're looking for my project. And lo and behold, Catherine changed my sculpture again. The bitch repainted my thing again. And I got really upset. My mother, of course, got furious and was furious about that. But yeah, she should have known better at that point, but she did it anyways because she was just spiteful and controlling and a shit teacher. And that was the bottom line of it, especially dealing with young children. If you did this to an adult, or if you did this to somebody in high school even, then the reaction would have been very different. That student would have been old enough and would have had the confidence to be able to protest and argue and complain about that action. But as a young 6-7-year-old boy, I couldn't speak on my own. I couldn't speak on my own behalf. And she obviously didn't give a shit about how I felt. Now that's a terrible story to hear within the boundaries of this not being a tragedy by any stretch of the imagination, but it was definitely something that was upsetting and something that wasn't fair. And it was an indication of a teacher who lacked professionalism. She lacked respect for her students and lacked respect for the artistic expression. Obviously, she didn't respect the child's form of self-expression. Now, why am I bringing this up? Is it because I'm trying to tell you how I was traumatized as a child and I grew up with, a feeling of impending doom throughout the rest of my artistic career? No. It was forgotten soon after, but it was, at least I moved on from that very quickly, but the lesson was not lost on me. And it was a valuable lesson. It was a lesson in respecting the voice of the individual, particularly when it comes to artistic expression, because the essence of artistic expression is, this is you. This is you. And the greatest lesson an artist can learn, and a lesson which I repeat in almost every single art talk and every single lesson I ever learn myself or teach, the thing that I keep revisiting in my own life journey is the knowledge of self. To learn the value of simply being yourself, and to realize that you, in your most unstaged way, when you're not wearing your makeup and your hair isn't looking all fly, and you just wake up in the morning and you haven't brushed your teeth yet, you're not feeling super sharp or anything like that, you, in that most basic state of who you are, is remarkable, is amazing, is fascinating. You as a human being are something absolutely incredible, and we tend to take this for granted because, we're always being bombarded with what we could be, right? Being bombarded with how we could look, how we could sound, the weight our body should be, the health and medical condition that our body should be in, etc., etc. We're always being we're always being shown and solicited how we can improve ourselves. And more often than not, there's a substantial price tag attached to that self-improvement, so to speak. And that lesson that I learned that day taught me that nobody should ever try to speak on your behalf when it comes to art, period. Now, this is a lesson that hasn't only trickled into my artistic journey, but it's also trickled into my journey as a teacher. It's trickled deeply into my journey as a teacher. It's trickled deeply into what I learn more and more as I get older and older as being one of the most valuable qualities a human being can possess for themselves and for others, and that is empathy. And I'm saying so directly quoting something I heard Meryl Streep say in a speech, a woman who I hold a lot of respect for. She said one of the most important qualities a human being can possess is empathy. What does that mean? It means that not only do you have the ability to care and feel for other people, but I would say it goes further than that. And a lesson that I've learned very deeply as of yet, something that I've kind of a new level to empathy that I've learned recently, is the ability to listen. The ability to listen. The ability to be quiet and respect the words of the person you hear. Just stop. And when I'm with you, when it's you and me and we're sitting down in this space together, I'm not sitting there waiting for a way to clarify the words that come out of your mouth or to offer you the vocabulary to better express what it is you're trying to express. I'm just there to close my eyes, to look at you very carefully, to listen to you very carefully, and pay attention to your words that come out of your mouth. And one of the things that you start to learn from other people when you do this is that people are used to not being heard entirely. People are used to not being heard because they almost look at you. They'll explain themselves to you. Somebody will tell me what they're going through. Somebody will tell me what they're experiencing, and they'll almost look at me with a look of the need for permission. Like, I know that's not the best way to say it, but that's kind of the way I'm feeling and everything. And there's this kind of awkwardness associated with trying their best to explain it to me in a way that I will show appreciation for. And I have to remind that person, no, I'm listening to you. I'm listening to your words. I'm listening to your vocabulary. And the only way I can truly understand and truly feel you as a person is to turn my brain off and completely tune myself into yours. And I feel that as an individual and as a parent and as a partner to somebody in my life who we've been together for over 20 years, and as a teacher and as an artist and as somebody who's talking to you right now on YouTube, this is one of the most important lessons I'm learning in my life: the art of listening, careful, respectable listening. And this was something that teacher, back when I was in elementary school, my quote art teacher, didn't know, didn't care to do, didn't see. She lacked that empathy. She thought to herself, this is how it should be expressed, and that's how you're going to express it. She was basically trying to turn me into her, I guess. What else would she be trying to do? Now, why am I going on about this? Because I see something in modern day art, a new trend in modern day art. And I'd say that's something that's been around for some time, but it's mostly been around in the last 10 to 15 years, give or take, since studio work, big group projects, video game production, film production, big artistic productions have started to become more and more mainstream. What I'm saying here ties into my last art talk that I just published just before this one, where I was talking about how the advice you get from people can be very one-sided, where a person can say, if you want to work as a professional, quote unquote, then you need to do it this way. And I went on to explain how that can be very, very misleading and very damaging advice that impacts the careers of many, many people. But I won't go on about that. You can go and check out that video if you want for yourself. But I want to elaborate on that. And I want to elaborate as to why that's a problem. And the solution that I'm not necessarily wholeheartedly giving today, but I definitely want to open the conversation to you to be able to discuss this, because I feel it is a problem. And I think it's a problem that is one that should be handled with more care and more caution than even this conversation of AI art right now, because I think this is something that's been around for a long time, and I see this objectively impacting the quality of artists and the quality of artistic journeys, the integrity of artists, the confidence that artists have in what they do. I see this impacting their lives now, today, and they have been for some time. AI, we'll see. That's to come. We're very new to that whole subject. But when you walk up to somebody, if you walk up to a professional, if you walk up to a teacher, if you walk up to a well-meaning fellow peer artist, it's starting to become more and more common for other professionals who have found, quote, success in this, quote, industry. And yes, I'm using quotes because I'm trying not to speak literally. I'm speaking figuratively here. They'll say, well, if you want to do it, then this is how it's got to be done. You have to do this. You have to know that skill. You have to do it this way. This is the subject material that we're looking for and what we're interested in. Yada yada yada. And that, if you think about it, really flies in the face of artistic expression, does it not? It's basically saying that if you want to be a creator, if you want to be original, if you want to be celebrated for your vision, then you have to share the same vision as everybody else who's working in this studio, everybody else who's working in this industry, everybody else who's working on this project. That doesn't sound like art to me, does it? That sounds like factory work. It feels like industry. So when people say if you want to work in this industry, I think that's what they really mean. I think the operative word is the word industry. It's factory work. It's here's the tools, here's the conveyor belt, there's your colors, go. Do it. And it's got to look like that. And you're expected to have this carbon copy approach like every other artist out there. Now, before I get too one-sided in this conversation, there are certain professions that demand the ability to adapt, right? Something that I alluded to last week, something I spoke about last week as well. Certain careers do demand the ability to be able to adapt and adopt a style that mimics as closely as possible your direct peer, your colleague, such as animation, right? If I'm watching a classically animated film that's drawn in cartoon, classically meaning cartoon as opposed to 3D, or more budget animation, that kind of thing. Your animated film cannot look like it was animated by 15 different people, which is usually the case, if not more. There are many people working on this same scene. So the whole workflow of working animation is you usually have one or maybe a small group of key animators that establish the look, that establish what the main poses are. And it's the in-between artists or the breakdown artists or any of the more junior artists to take that information and try to repeat it in sequence to create an animated film. And it should feel like all of these frames were drawn by the same person. They were all drawn using the same hand. That vision must stay consistent. This is why we have things like model sheets and character rotations and pose sheets, etc. In that particular case, yes, an animator's job is to be able to mimic the style guide religiously close. But illustration, concept art, that kind of thing, in that particular case, the opposite applies. Your vision becomes sacrosanct. Your vision is the product. What you are providing to your audience is you. It's your style. It's your vision. This is why you look at artists like Brahm, or you look at artists like Loish, or you look at artists like Cynthia Shepherd or Martina Fakova or any of these artists, and you go, I immediately recognize that it's their art. You recognize it because their signature is all over it. Their personal form of expression is all over it. And even if we have a collection of artists like Carla Ortiz or Martina Fakova that are both working on magic, for instance, magic cards, you can still distinguish one artist from the other. They're both within the same genre of art. They're both fantasy illustrators, but they have their own signature style. They themselves had chosen the career path that they chose. They chose a medium. They chose a language of art that resonated with them personally, but adapted it and evolved it into their own personal form of self-expression so that you can appreciate the same genre of art using slightly different artistic instruments, right? And this is something we appreciate. It's the same thing as being a country artist, a country musician, or being a rock musician, or being a classical musician, or being a jazz musician. They all follow that same general fundamental template of that genre of music, but they have their own unique recipe of expression so that you can identify what they do. If you're looking up jazz music in the music collection, you're going to get a selection of different jazz musicians and you can pick your favorites. But you don't expect every single jazz musician to make carbon copy music. You like that sense of variety within that genre. So, when does that line get crossed? When has it gone too far? When has it gone from a style guide or a genre to being an environment that damages the integrity of artistic expression? Or when it's a thought process, it's a structure, an artistic industrial structure to artwork that starts to chip away at the integrity of the artist. And this is something that I think about a lot. I think about this a lot being a teacher who celebrates the fact that every single artist I have the joy of sitting down with is an identity waiting to be uncovered, or an identity that's already been uncovered, but an identity that wants to be expanded and grow and become a bigger, better, more robust version of their existing self. As an artist who was raised by a fine artist whose art is entirely unique from everybody else's art I've ever seen, whose form of self-expressions for her personal philosophy, how she thinks, how she sees, how she believes, her entire life is wrapped up in every brushstroke that she makes. It's very, very personal to her. To being somebody who ended up working in the video game industry, where I was expected to follow certain style guides or working on certain projects. I've worked in projects that respected my individuality, in a studio setting, of course, where my personal input was asked of me. And I've worked in certain environments where people would look at my artwork and laugh at it because it wasn't up to par with the rest of the elites, because I did something differently than somebody else did, or because I was following and learning from the quote wrong resources. And just like I mentioned in my last art talk, you hear this shit all the time. You see this shit all the time. And I'll be honest with you, I see people who have reached a certain status artistically, either YouTubers or, public artists or celebrity artists, and they have such a goddamn aggressive approach to their opinion. And I look at that and I think to myself, you're not an artist. You're just a very, very efficient factory worker. But I don't think that qualifies you as being an artist, because if you were an artist, then your unique form of expression and your respect for the unique expressions of everybody else around you would be priority number one. You would have a deep empathy and respect for the individual. You would be able to look and listen to another person's form of artistic expression. And instead of looking at it and trying to pick it apart and compare it to your own and say, well, I know so-and-so can do this better. You should probably work on that more. With respect, of course, to their skill level, because you're always doing so relative to their skill level, right? And instead look at them and really pay close attention and say, what is this person trying to express? What is this person saying? Where is that person's mind? What is that person thinking? What is that person living? And instead of sitting there and just shooting your mouth off with your opinion on how it can be improved, instead, just listen to that artist. Unfortunately, and frustratingly, being in a teacher's position, being somebody who's seen many other types of teachers, have a very strong opinion about teaching in general. And although, I don't want this to come across as a hot take or anything like that, I get very, very triggered by bad teachers. And there's a lot of bad teachers out there, right? And I know this can sound like a bit of a contradiction, saying that, that one should not conform. But in my opinion, in my artistic opinion, in my professional opinion, the number one quality a teacher should be able to have is, number one, an ability to deeply listen to somebody, to really make an effort to understand that individual, regardless of whether or not they're professionals who've been doing it for 70 years or they're beginners that have been doing it for a month. Be able to look at them and pay very close attention and be able to go, that's what you're saying. I get it. I see it. And you listen very closely. You listen with your eyes. You listen with your ears to that artist. You ask them to explain what's happening to you, and you pay very close attention. And with your many years of wonderful experience as a professional, be able to go, I see where you're trying to go with that. I see what you're saying. I understand you. And I swear to God, when you understand an artist, If you can show that understanding and you can truly demonstrate that understanding in an artist, regardless of their age, you start to develop a friendship with them. You start to develop a relationship with them on a very personal level. And most of all, you start to develop the ability to be able to help them, to be able to offer them growth right away in an impactful, meaningful way. This lesson isn't only for private mentorships like my own, because I only work one-on-one with students. I kind of only insist on working one-on-one with students. But in classrooms, online classrooms, or in brick and mortar schools, I want this message to start permeating through the industry, because I'm starting to see that big corporations like Electronic Arts and big video game companies with lots of money and lots of budgets and CEOs and executive producers who walk around in their suits and ties and drive their 16 Teslas and Rolls Royces, they're starting, or they're not starting, they have for some time been dictating the direction that artists go. They are industrializing the artistic mind. They are crossing that line. They have been crossing that line for some time. And that's one of the key reasons why when I sit down with an artist, especially the professionals that have been doing this for some time, we sit down for a first class and I say, so how you doing? And they go, well, all right, so tell me a little bit about your past, right? It's usually how we start, just getting to know each other and stuff. And they go, oh, well, I've been working in the industry and I worked at this video game company. I'm working for that company too. I worked as a graphic designer for this many years and blah, blah, blah. And, I've been doing this and doing that. And I worked on this big project and that big project. And I've made, a lot of names and I've met this person. Oh, wow, flex, 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 flex. And then they end that very long, impressive explanation of their career history with, but I'm just not satisfied with what I do. I've lost my voice. I've lost my drive to draw. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, but you've made it, haven't you? You're there. You've reached the gold bar. You've worked for these big companies. You're the hot shot. You're the star. Everybody wants to be you. How could you be dissatisfied? And they say, I just don't feel like I'm heard. I just don't feel like, I feel like I've lost so much touch. I've drifted so far from my core artistic, expressive self. I don't even know how to get myself back anymore. And very often, one of the biggest challenges I have with artists like that, the welcome challenges I have, is teaching them how to let go. Teaching them how to trust themselves again. Teaching them how, these very often a seasoned professional artist, I'm working with one right now who's exceptionally gifted artistically, but she's really struggling to we're working together to find her again. And man, when she needed permission from me just to say, find your own pace, find your own rhythm. Here's how you can look for it. Here's what you can explore. These are tools you can use to start to find yourself as an artist. And that thought, it's crazy. That thought, that permission stressed her out. It scared her. She'd gotten so used to being in adapting herself to such a strict work method, to such a strict ecosystem of thought, such a strict structure, that breaking that structure made her feel like she was falling off the edge of a cliff. And I don't blame her. I mean, to achieve the level of success that she's achieved is remarkable. I mean, she's one in many that actually managed to reach that level. And yet that came at a cost. And for her, what I'm doing with her right now, what we're doing together week by week, is chiseling away at that big brick wall she's built around her. And teaching her how to find the freedom of mind to be able to just express herself and to have faith in herself that those fundamentals are there. They're not going anywhere, but that now she's got to find herself again. And she is. And my God, what an exciting experience we're having together. Just going on this adventure together as fellow artists. And that's what I want for you too. That's what I want for you too. Now, I'm not giving you this advice because I'm not saying this because I'm saying, ignore the professionals and only do your thing and, smoke weed and hang out in the forest and live in a shack and do your... if that's what you want to do, cool. You do you, baby. I'm not judging. But I am saying that it's very important as artists to be able to filter out the difference between adaptation and conforming to a norm in a studio setting to being an artist who finds their own unique voice, their own unique expression. Because over the centuries, artists were celebrated for their unique vision. And then all of a sudden, in the last, not even half a century, in the last 15 years, that voice of ours is being squashed. That voice of ours is being taken away from us. And one day we're going to be showing up in suits and ties and doing the corporate thing. And that to me is far more tragic than any artificial intelligence could, because this would be us being micromanaged and controlled in a supposed creative environment, which basically means the death of creativity, in my humble opinion. So what's the big moral of the story? What's the takeaway from this? I think the takeaway from this is just, I want to give some insight into our careers moving forward, into our world moving forward. I want to create a ripple in the water of our future that hopefully will grow, so that as things change, as these ripples get larger in this industry, as the industry gets bigger, our ripples get bigger and we become. So why am I sharing this with you today? Why am I sharing these thoughts? What's the big moral of today's art talk? I think it's to create a ripple. I want to create a ripple in this conversation. A ripple that grows larger the more the industrial influence of studios grows larger. So that the larger industry gets, the more influence industry gets, the more sensitive we become to what exactly is being taken away from us as artists. This isn't a fight against evil conversation. This is us adapting to our artistic future in a way that allows us to continue to contribute to the world in a creative and artistic way. Because if it wasn't for us artists, innovation would not exist. Growth would cease to exist. Vision would cease to exist. It's because of people like us, of visionaries like us, that the world grows and evolves and matures and becomes a more and more beautiful place. And I think that if that was to be taken over by something industrial, then by the time AI sticks its claws in our neck and strangles us, we won't give a shit anymore. And that to me would be the most tragic thing of all. And with that said, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.